to 2020, which is good news considering there was a 25% increase in 2019 to 20. Lois Anderson heads Oregon Right to Life and tells AFN one concern is the number of weeks for a patient seeing a doctor.
That number went down from 9 weeks to 5 weeks. So I think anybody that's tried to get an appointment with a physician in the past year knows that a 5-week relationship with a physician is a very short period of time, and it probably means only one appointment.
Another concern is that out of 383 people asking to kill themselves, only 2 were referred for psychiatric evaluation, when so many want to die because of depression that can be readily treated in most patients. 79% of patients were on Medicare, not all elderly. And Anderson says that raises another red flag.
We know that there's going to be, in addition to just the pressures of perhaps having a diagnosis of a terminal illness, perhaps feeling like you don't want to be a burden on your family, which is something that's noted as a reason why people give that they ask for these prescriptions, but also financial pressure.
That also can send a person further spiraling into depression. And again, it can be treated, as well as pain, to help a person until natural death. I'm Charlie Butts.
And remember that you can access American Family News 24 hours a day, 7 days a week when you log on to the World Wide Web at afn.net. And you can download the AFN app. And that is American Family News on the Hour. I'm Chad Groening.
AFR programming is now available on Alexa.
You're joking, right?
Nope, not joking.
Seriously?
Yep, this is not a drill.
Wait a minute. No way.
There's a way, the Alexa way. So if you just happen to miss your favorite shows, no worries. You can now listen to each podcast with Alexa. It's simple and it's free. Just visit afr.net/apps and click Alexa. We're not joking.
You know, as Christians, we have to understand and be real with where we are.
That's what we have to see first, individually.
And where our mindset is and what we desire.
Airing the Addisons.
I think what God is really calling us back to, it's those individual personal revivals in our own lives where we're like, oh Lord, what have we done? We have minimized you.
Promoting truth, wisdom, and empowerment.
As the church, man, we should be on the forefront of making disciples, of indoctrination in godly things.
If we don't train our kids, they will not be able to stand.
Airing the Addisons.
On American Family Radio, welcome to Friday with the Addisons. We appreciate you listening. I'm Miki.
And I'm Will.
And Brother Richard and J Mac are on tap to help us navigate the show. Usually we do a little bit of a lighter show. We call it our gumbo show. Everything just kind of goes into the pot. I will tell you, we're going to have a special focus today. We're asking the question, what about the children? And I feel like to a certain extent, we ask that question every time we talk about any issue. I almost feel like it's almost every time.
Yeah.
So this may not be as unique a show as I think it is in my mind. But I will say this. Here's what I would like to do. I kind of would like to open the phone lines just a little bit earlier. Excuse me. But I want to weave phone calls in and out of our conversation today.
Okay.
And our question is, what about the children? So here is what I want to do. And I'm going to set up in this segment, and then we come back on the other side of the segment. We'll open the phone lines up and get some of your questions and your comments. I'd like to hear some of your observations. We live in a culture that is hostile to truth, that is in open rebellion against God, and is longing excuse me, to influence our children, longing to influence our children away from the faith. And I want to tell you something. The progression of this battle that we are in over the souls of our children is glaring. Like this is probably one of those intense moments. If you guys can think about maybe what you've read in history, for some of us, what we've experienced to a certain extent, but certainly the longer you live, the more experience you get to kind of rack up under your belt. And then for some of us who didn't have those experiences, we are able to read about it. Yeah. And then as you mature in the Lord, you're able to read with great discernment. You didn't have to live through something, but you could read and maybe understand the way the enemy is operating in that time. And so what am I saying? Here's the point that I'm trying to make. There are certain, how do I explain this? Okay, let me tell you what I have noticed. Let me tell you what I've noticed. Okay. An illustration here to make my point, because I really want people to understand what I'm trying to communicate. So I'll use our son, JD, as an example. As I watch him grow, there are moments in his growth, and if you've got older kids, you may have seen this before, where he goes through this stage where he gets really, really like chubby. Okay, he gets real chubby, and then all of a sudden he wakes up the next morning and he has stretched out. Right. So he's growing a little bit every day. Right. I mean, his body is changing. He's growing a little bit every day. But there are those moments where there's actually a noticeable, like, there's something happening.
You can see it.
Like you see it. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Right. And then what I usually do is I look back and I go, oh, that explains his body was actually preparing for this growth. Like, it's an amazing thing. He just kind of will stretch out, you know? And I believe that we see this happening, spiritually speaking, we see this happening in the culture where the enemy is sort of always seeking to make these gains, like grabbing these little pieces here and there. And we're always in a battle. Daily, we're in a battle. But there are critical moments where there is like a sudden lurching toward wickedness, where you're like, whoa, what just happened, right? But each generation, I think, experiences this in different ways, right? So maybe you had the rebellion of the boomers in the 60s. You know what I mean? The open rebellion, the rejection of the norms of their parents, where the sexual revolution would be maybe how you would kind of describe that. I don't know. And of course I didn't live it. I just read about it. But when I read these things, I go, whoa, that was a critical moment. Like that was a lurching forward.
Those were markers in time where you can point back to and say like, okay, this is when some things changed.
Yes, exactly. And so what I'm saying is that I believe that right now we are in another one of those moments where it is not the sexual revolution of our children. And I would say it is not even a revolution that our children are choosing. But it is a revolution of sorts. And I would say it is a revolution in the sexualization of our children, like not just exposing them to sexual content, but causing great confusion among them. And it's happening on many different fronts. And we could look at this as just sort of like, well, this is just how culture moves along. This is just kind of how we keep going. But I really think that there is something, spiritually speaking, much bigger than that. I think this is a moment of great lurching. And so when you have this sort of like, boom, like this quick, like just jerking forward, what should be our response to that? Now, we could dumb it out and just be like, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, it's just times that we're living in, and you could just downplay it, or you could use the type of discernment that God expects you to have. God expects you to have discernment. Like the Lord did not put us in this culture, deposit us in this world, and leave us to just be like, that's just the way. We are tasked with being salt and light. So there's a great responsibility. There's a great expectation on our part, right? So what are we supposed to do? So if we are able to discern these things and see these things, there must be some things that we're expected to do. And so now I have often lamented in different ways, why didn't parents of old kind of do some things differently? As you saw these things making grabs, and I think part of it was a certain dullness. Yeah. Right? Like it was a certain...
It's pointing to something I think we experience now. It's like that in every generation that there have been a dullness about something that has gone on to the next generation. And
Come on.
It just continues to go on.
That's exactly the point that I'm making. So I don't want to be a part of my children's look back and say, man, how did y'all let that happen? I want to call it out. You know what I mean? I want to be in the group of people who are saying, this is absolute wickedness. This is on purpose. This is not an accident. You've got people who are being very intentional and very sinister. I'm asking the question, so man, what about our children? Like, are we going to just say, well, you know, there's things that they're going to have to experience. Are we going to be cowards? Right? Are we going to be cowards and then just let these things happen? Or are we going to do the difficult work that has always been the expectation of those who follow the Lord, that we're supposed to be distinct in the earth? And are we going to send a message? Are we going to send a message? And so what I'm talking about may sound a little bit radical, but it's crazy because the early church would have been like, that's not radical.
Yeah.
Like the early church would have been like, that's what we call living. What you call radical is what we call living. It's actually called being in the world, but not of it. Right? Like, so this is what is required in this moment. So I want to turn our attention back to Florida again. And people are like, man, Miki, why won't you get your finger off Disney? Because Disney has its fingers on your children. Yeah. And guess what, my friends? They know it. Their employees know it. Their shareholders know it. Okay.
Yeah. They know. Mm-hmm. They know it. And as we see, advocacy groups know it. Like
yes.
HRC, like those agenda driven, right. They know it too.
That's right. The Human Rights Campaign, GLAAD, all of the media, they all know that Disney has trust among parents, and they know that Disney has the eyes and ears and the affection of children. And so the press on Disney now is, so what are you going to do? With that kind of influence comes great responsibility, Disney. And so they are all calling on Disney to do better, but we somehow don't. We're like, nah, we're still going to consume it. We're not going to press Disney. We're not going to hold Disney's feet to the fire. We're not going to say, hey, listen, you know, you had been a trusted name in our home, but you're straying away. No, we say we're not going to do that. We're just going to keep consuming it here and there. And let me tell you, even for those who won't admit publicly that they're still consuming it, they're still consuming it. And they will message online and they will post online how this is reprehensible, but at the same time they still have Disney Plus streaming in their homes. Yeah. So what I'm saying though is, where is the real grassroots activism where people say, you know what, I'm not going to do that. Now here's how I want to make the case. All right. I want to look at a few stories here that I think really reveal this moment that we're in. And unless people pull the plug on some things, you will look back on this moment and you will remember that, man, this was the great lurching forward. This was the moment where it was blatant, it was open, where people openly admitted, hey, we know we have access to children here. And so we're not gonna give up that access, right? But the parents who are tasked with protecting the children stood by and said nothing. This will be the moment that you'll look back on. This is the mass sort of like, how do we reprogram? Okay, so here is again a few more stories from the world itself, and you know what I mean, the world itself. As Disney reels over, and this is the headline that they had made, the actual bill is the Parental Rights and Education Bill that we're talking about in Florida, House Bill 1557, Senate Bill 1834, now signed into law to protect children in Florida, passing the House and the Senate to protect children in Florida. But it was, what's the word I want to use? It was hatefully and erroneously and intentionally misleadingly, that's a lot, called the Don't Say Gay bill. But it's all of those. I mean, that's what they did, right? Yeah. And you had even the conservatives on their outlets referring to this bill in this way, which I thought is such a major lose for us. Like, why do we say these things? I understand there are certain things that can be unavoidable, but the things that can be avoided, avoid them. Like, why? You know what I mean? So anyway, so here's this story here. It says Disney reels over, and then, of course, it's from a secular outlet, The Hollywood Reporter, and so it calls it the Don't Say Gay bill. All right. Staffers are now debating whether or not they should take their grievance with Disney public or maintain their private stand. Okay. Should they take their grievance public or maintain their private stand? I find this really interesting, and I want to share it with you because I want you to understand that this truly is war. It's like the gauntlet has been thrown down, and the winner will get the spoils. And the spoils are our children. Man. Guys, I can't stress that enough. The spoils are our children. And that's why I'm asking the question. It seems like it's such a simple question. Like, what about the children? Like, do we care as much as they care? It seems that they are more committed to our children for their aims and objectives than we are. And that really grieves me. I find that to be very weak and cowardly. Here's the article. It begins this way. Don't ever take sides with anyone against the family. That's been an unspoken rule at Disney, as in much of corporate America, for generations. But in a dramatic departure from the company's longstanding culture of public positivity, some LGBTQ employees of the media giant have been breaking that rule to object to Disney's handling of Florida's bill. I'm not calling it what they call it. I'm just kind of editing on the fly here as necessary. All right. When what in previous eras might have sparked internal employee grumbling about a company policy instead went public in spectacular fashion, thanks to mounting frustration over so-called anti-gay legislation cropping up nationally. A generational change in how employees view their activism at work.
Wow.
And listen to this, guys, and this is so important. This article reads, a tight job market in animation means that there are other attractive places besides Disney to make animated films and TV shows. In other words, the push on Disney is you're not the only place to work if we want a career in animation. And what should be understood from that statement is that in those places will meet our goals and objectives.
Wow.
We're going to talk about what some of those places are on the other side of the break. Aaron the Addisons, Friday edition. Stay there.
For American Family Radio, this is Gateways to Better Education. I'm Eric Buer. The U.S. Department of Education published new guidance on religious freedom in public schools. One of the things it added was accountability for schools. In 2002, Congress amended the Elementary and Secondary Education Act to require that public schools certify they have no policy against students praying at school. Well, that's a rather low bar. A school might not have an official policy against prayer, but in practice, they might not allow it. The Department of Education has now made clear that states must have a process for students, parents, and teachers to report violations of their right to participate in protected religious expression. It requires each state to notify the department of any complaint against schools. For details on the new guidance from the Department of Education, visit gogateways.org/free to speak.
The following are real-life stories from Trinity Debt Management.
My story begins with debt, a lot of debt.
I used my credit cards as a source of income.
It was not a good situation.
I couldn't pay my bills.
The interest on the cards was really high.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
I initially was scared to call, and immediately I felt relief.
They contacted all of our creditors, and they put us on a plan for success.
Trinity will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, reduce your interest, and possibly improve your credit score. You'll save thousands.
I've been able to pay off close to $15,000.
We're doing a lot better.
Please pick up the phone and see how affordable and easy it is to pay off your debt.
It's a godsend.
We're debt-free for keeps.
Call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813.
A Moment of Truth with Gary Bryden of the Association of Independent Methodists.
A young pastor friend gave my wife and I a plaque for a wedding present that read, "Only one life 'twill soon be past, only what's done for Christ will last." How true that is. That plaque has been hanging on our home for all of our married life, and how quickly the years have passed. What's done for Christ is truly what will last. Paul expresses it another way. My beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. None of our prized possessions, power, fame, or bank accounts will go with us. When we leave this world, only what's done for Christ will last.
The Association of Independent Methodists, like-minded congregations doing together what can't be done separately. Visit aim2020.com.
Appreciate your grind and give me everything I need, but I really want your time. I must confess, it's hard to express how I'm feeling, but I'm growing blocks of bitterness, quickly becoming buildings. Listen, you're never home, to the point that I don't notice when you're gone. I'm getting older, but I'm growing all alone. How can you raise me without even knowing me? Everything I do is just to get you to notice. When you realize you're the great influence in my life.
Welcome back to Aaron the Addisons on American Family Radio. It's the Friday edition. Of sorts, it's the Gumbo Show. Everything kind of goes in the pot. We want you to be a part of this conversation. Want to weave in your comments. The question I'm asking today that I've been thinking about this all week as we're looking at what is happening in Florida, but it has ripple effects. So this is what's happening in Hollywood, so to speak, what's happening in entertainment, and the cards that I think are being revealed, kind of being turned face up in a bold, brazen lurch forward. In their minds, lurch forward, I really see it's a lurch attack. Like it's a, just a movement toward wickedness, really.
Yeah.
But we're in this moment right now, and our children are in the crosshairs. And I don't know if there's ever been a more obvious moment in history where it's like the aim is to just take your children away. I mean, they're like singing songs about it. Mm-hmm. Like you know what I mean? Like I just don't know that there's been a more just sort of like brazen attack on children.
And I think it's been there, like you're saying, it's with a high hand right now. It's brazen, but I think under the currents, that's been the move and the push for some. But now it's like the manifestation of it. It's the timing. It's like it feel like it's the right time, to just come out boldly with this type of stuff.
And so then it makes you wonder, like for parents, it makes you wonder, okay, so what are we going to do? Like what are we going to do? Are we just, will we just say, man, that's a shame. Oh, I can't believe that's happening. Or like, man, excuse me. Did you hear that story they were talking about? Or did you read that? Or is there something a little more intense that we can do? And I think that there is. Anyway, welcome back to the program. I'm Miki.
And I'm Will, and that was Parent Me by Jason.
All right, so looking at this story here, well, let me open the phone lines up because we'll periodically go back and forth to the phone lines and weave in the story here as we're talking about this. So if you have the patience for that, we'd love to hear from you today. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. We can get the calls queued up. I want to say this one thing. We got an email from a sister who was asking, man, it's kind of troubling as you look around all the things that are going on. And she was wondering, what is it that we let our kids watch? So I will tell you very little. And once we find something that we approve of, we still take it. If it's like a series, it's still episode by episode. And it's not like, and unfortunately, and, to our kids' great groaning, if there's a series that we like and we're like, oh, that's funny, that's okay, and then they betray our trust, they're out. Once they tell us that we can't trust them, then we're out. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it just, and
it's not an easy thing to
it's
do
not
either,
easy, guys. It's not easy.
Like you're saying, it's necessary, and we have been given the responsibility to govern all of that, as parents,
Absolutely.
So you got to do what you got to do.
I will tell you this. We started out, in our family, we had DirecTV because it's like, that's just what everybody does. Like everybody has TV, right? Like, so you just think like everybody has TV. You had DirecTV. Then the Lord, by His Spirit, started dealing with our heart that we were like, we don't really need this actually. I mean, all of these channels, we don't even watch this. You know what I mean? Right. So we got rid of DirecTV and we got Roku and we had Netflix. And then the Lord just started dealing with our heart about Netflix. And we were like, we don't really need it. And this was before the 13 Reasons. Like we had gotten rid of Netflix because we kind of started to see that some of the programming was just kind of leaning a little bit, and we didn't feel like we could monitor it as well because once we had commended this streaming platform to our children, they were able to then navigate it, right? So they were able to just go on and pick shows and all this because we said, okay, so this is the setting that we have for you. So we felt like it was pretty safe. But then we started to learn, actually it's not safe, and we can't commend Netflix to our kids. Like, we can't. And so we got rid of it. And we said, okay, so we're just going to do Roku, and we'll just choose the channels that they can watch. We choose the programs. And so now they've got some of these, they've got some of these YouTubers that they like that start out, they're okay.
Right.
And then excuse me, I'm so sorry, guys. Then we have to ask them.
And then you got to do what you got to do. And the thing is, I know that there are other options out there. And I don't know I've heard of what PureFlix and VidAngel, I think it's called. There's some things that you can do, but what we've decided on is to really have something that we feel like we're in control over, that we can pick, hand pick, and say we want this, we want that, or we don't want this, or whatever. And so that's been what's worked for us at this point.
Yeah, and I will say so as far as, because this is a very practical question, people have said, so what do you allow? So we have Roku. We choose the channels. The adults choose the channels that are available through Roku. If our kids learn about something from somebody at church, or they hear another kid talking about, hey, did you hear about this? Then we will look into it together. We don't just say, oh yeah, then that's automatically approved, because people have different filters. Right. So we say, well, let's look at it together. We'll check it out.